TV on mute. So we're gonna have to get you back on to mute and all of that. There we
Good
go.
morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition. And on this show, we talk about innovation, global affairs, and what we're continuing to do to navigate a never ending pandemic. We welcome you to our show, soon to be a part of the Roku TV network. I want to begin my monologue today before we get started to talk about American democracy. I apologize if I'm not as high energy as I usually am. I'm not feeling well. I had some food poisoning last night, so I'm dragging a little bit this morning. But here it goes. I we talked about the decline of American democracy last week. Many of us last night watched Fareed Zakaria's show, The Decline of American Democracy. We're going to talk about that documentary if anyone saw it. There were some comparisons, not to Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler, but to the situation in Germany as the Third Reich emerged from the Weimar Republic and how democracy died in Germany. There were a lot of similarities between Germany in the 1920s and 30s and the condition of the United States. Conservatives allying themselves with outsiders for political gain and creating a situation based on conspiracies, and people didn't know what to believe, so they followed a strong leader, and hence you had the Third Reich. Now, the point I want to make today is based on something surprising to me that happened a few days ago. I have a city newsletter that I send from Morrisville, and that is the home sound where I greet you every day in North Carolina. Now, I what I did was I sent an email about saving democracy, and what I was trying to say was that we need to figure out a way to bring awareness to the American people that there are dangers of democracy declining. Now, I got two or three negative emails. The good thing is they were very respectful, and they were from people that seemed to be leaning more conservative Republican, and they accused me for being misleading as an elected official, and that in their opinion, they felt that many of the freedoms were being taken away. Most of the emails were talking about vaccinations, abortions, guns, vaccines, and criticizing the liberal media for painting a negative brush for all Republicans, just assuming they all vote for Trump or they all support Trump. I want to take this opportunity to reclarify what I was trying to say to my constituents, but I think it's important as the host of this show to tell you where I stand. First of all, as I have always said, I do not believe ever that anyone should be blamed for having their own political beliefs or convictions. Whether you're a Republican and you believe in abortion, more guns, you believe in the Second Amendment, you have every right to believe that. And if you're a Democrat, whether you're a moderate or a progressive, you have every right to believe that, your positions on those issues. But I want people to understand that the fact of the matter is the danger for our democracy isn't whether we're Democrat or Republican. What I was trying to say is the changes being made in American democracy today for the outcomes of the elections to be decided by political maneuver. I've gone through this before, but I'm going to have to go through it again. In Georgia, powers are being taken away by Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, based on what happened in last year's election, that he will no longer have the oversight over elections. The same is being true for Arizona. Voting laws are being changed and curtailed as we speak. But the most important thing is that efforts are being made so that these states, if an election were to be close, like the 2020 election, some of these states, like Arizona, like Georgia, like Michigan, were bordering on 1.5 to 2% margin. And if they had gone the other way, Donald Trump could have won. Now, Trump is the nominee. Clearly, these changes would give him the advantage. But the danger is not that it's whether Trump got in because of unfair advantage, that any other party could use the same tactic when they get in power to change the outcome of an election, to even change the results of a presidential election. We could wake up one day with a country even more divided, where there's no legitimately elected leader because half the country believes that person hasn't been put in office. Now, we've seen this happen in many countries I've mentioned before, like Venezuela. It's happening in Hungary. It's happening in Cuba. It's happening in Tunisia. It's happening in Sudan. It's going on in Afghanistan as our troops pulled out. This decay and disruption of democracy is something very important. And I believe, as a media guy and an elected official, I have an obligation to report the facts. The final thing I'll say in terms of vaccinations is that clearly I'm going to close out today on how we're dealing with this pandemic differently. But there has been studies and data showing that there is a study that shows that if you are vaccinated with 2 doses and a booster, you're 88% less likely to get the Omicron variant. That is a fact. Now, we can get into the debates of the freedom of the invasion of your personal privacy or body, and I get it. I understand it. And I think we're dealing with balancing these things as we talk about democracy. I'll close out with this. I think it is fine for us to be worried about our positions on guns and abortions and um, immigration and those kinds of things. But I think it's more important for us to come together as Americans and realize that there is a looming and increasingly dangerous situation, one that has to be brought to the attention of the public. That is my final take today as we begin our show. With us today, we have Mark Lee. We have hopefully Sasha Starr from Canada
We do have Sasha Starr from Canada
and
joining
Nicholas.
us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And I am working on getting guests for MLK. I'm a little bit behind. I lost a day of work because of my situation. And I'm hopefully I'm looking better than I'm feeling, but I'm feeling absolutely miserable right now. um, but we're going to be bringing in some guests for MLK next week. But I want to begin with you, Sasha,
Okay.
and I want to spend some time today talking about this because I think that it was very interesting for me to see these emails that came in. And the thing is, they were very respectful, just basically claiming that I was being misleading. And it made me feel bad that maybe I jumped the gun too quickly and was sort of saying, "Ha ha, you're the one to blame." It forced me to step back and say maybe the media has to do a better job of identifying what the problem is. That it's not so much Donald Trump, even though I know you and I don't think he was a good president, but it's about the fact of outcomes of elections being determined, right? Do you believe that that is something that Americans should be concerned about?
Very much so. Right now, the greatest danger is that through social media or even regular media and outcome of the election has very little to do with the real results. It has to do with the passion of supporters of certain candidate, and it seems to me the higher is a level of passion for a certain candidate, with the skillful use of social media and regular media and so on, they can create a perception of their favorite winning, and it could be so strong that, of course, we are talking about contested election. Let's see if one side would win, say, 65% majority of votes and the other only 35, that wouldn't apply. But lately, we see that it's very close, even with Biden winning 7 million votes. Look, it still has a lot of doubts, and I believe 70% of Republicans still believe that
But
Trump is
and
the real
and
winner.
where it dawned upon me, I'm going to go to Mark, but I think Sasha, thank you so much. And I think this is starting off to be a good show. I feel because I think it's important for us. But I want to, first of all, I learned from this experience, and moving forward, what I've decided is I'm going to try to make my blogs and my posts sound a little less political and let people know, even if they didn't vote for me or they're Republicans. Fortunately, these two Republicans did vote for me, and they just were concerned, But I think that what's not getting out there to the public, and I don't think I've done a good enough explaining as the host of this show. And Mark, I'm going to go to you, but I want to reiterate it again. There's a reasoning behind what's happening. The fact that they're taking these powers away in Arizona, in Michigan, in Georgia. These are swing states. Like Sasha Starr said, 1.5% variance, 2% variance going the other way could. Um, hold on one second. This is a senator calling. I will call right back. Okay.
No problem. We got to get those calls. By the way, Nick, you sound like you're on mute and everything, but yeah, he was bringing up some.
I'm not on mute now.
Yeah, it sounds like he was bringing up some interesting points and things along those lines. And actually, a couple of things that I was going to bring up to him and everything. But I'd love to hear Your thoughts about this. One has to do with the economics. I actually watched 60 Minutes yesterday, and they had a
Mhm.
great story about the great resignation and the
Sure.
job market that is out there and everything. And one of the things that they said was, and we've talked about it on this show a number of times, how a lot of people are quitting jobs across the board. They said that it is 4.4% of all positions in education are open, over 6% in retail, and more than 8% in healthcare, and in open jobs in hotel and restaurants are nearly 9%. And they pointed out that that's almost 1.5 million vacant positions, and that folks are trying to get folks to fill these positions, even offering them kind of incentives. I think that one person was offering tuition to be paid if they want to go into another career, if they want to go into other things along those lines. And I think there was somebody that was in the construction field that was offering that, because they did talk to a restaurant owner and a construction owner, and they actually talked to some people that were just down the road from us in Greenville, South Carolina. That seemed to be the focal point of the story. But there's a couple of things that were brought up that I found really interesting. One, those percentages, because we've oftentimes wondered whether the low unemployment rates actually include these numbers and everything. And then another thing that I found very interesting, like I said, was some of the incentive programs that were being offered, and how a number of the jobs, I want to say that they said that it used to be, I don't remember the exact figures, but it was something like 1 in 67 or 1 in something like that were remote, and it is much more than that right now. So we are definitely moving into a more of a remote culture, and all of that, meaning the vast majority of jobs are remote jobs. As a matter of fact, before we started, I was telling Steve that I just got an email that I've been anxiously awaiting and everything, because as y'all know, because I've mentioned it several times on this network, one of my jobs is educational assessment, and we, for the last, I think, 3 years, have been doing it remotely. And I've been waiting to get an email as to when the next assignment will start, and it looks like it'll start at the end of the month and will probably last until summer or fall of this year and everything, based on the different assignments we have. But the first assignment just came in, so that gave me some great deal of relief, because while I enjoy the work that we do here, I also needed to get a little bit more stable economic footing. We'll just put it that way, and everything along those lines. But I was just wondering your thoughts about, and this is for you, Nick, as one that is in the legal field, and maybe Sasha can jump in as well. They gave the impression that they think that this is going to be the new norm, that we're going to see a lot of people that are going more into entrepreneurship, going more into remote work, going less into what is happening now. So I was just wondering your thoughts as to this, the new norm. Do we need to think that the office economy that we were so used to is a thing of the past, or will it be kind of blended into this new normal that also includes the metaverse? And as they say on Clubhouse, I'll land my plane on that.
Well, I mean, this goes back, Mark, to I've been saying the failure of the American education system. How many entrepreneur classes did you take when you were in high school?
None that I recall.
Okay. What about middle school?
None that I recall.
Okay.
As I recall,
Right.
that I
Okay,
learned
so
about.
went to Marquette, a great university. You took an entrepreneurship class there, right? How to own your own business.
No, I did not take a
Okay.
class.
Well,
I did
Sasha
take some
took them, I'm
business
sure.
classes.
Sasha, you took entrepreneurship classes when you were in school.
No, not because my school
Okay.
was located in the city of Odessa at
Okay.
the Soviet Union.
So you didn't believe in entrepreneurship. Well, okay.
Yes.
See, this is something that we're bringing out on our channel, which is not brought out in major media. It's really the failure of the U.S. education system. There's no place that teaches entrepreneurship. In other words, you can go through our whole system. Now, here's the result of this system. 70% of Americans don't have $1,000. Now, that's going to create, on Sasha's Modern Investing show, a huge loss of people that aren't going to watch the show. Think about it, Sasha. In the United States, we've already lost 70% of Americans because they don't even have 1,000, let alone you're showing them how to invest in MPLX, you're showing SPACs, you're showing Mo's, you're showing the ticker tapes, you're showing how to do covered call writing, how to lift yourself out of poverty. But they're already in poverty and they don't have any money.
Nick, I think situation is worse than you think.
It is worse than you think.
If you will add another probably 20 or so percent of people who don't have $10,000, and those who don't have $10,000 from investment point of view are on the same level as those who don't have $1,000. So then you're talking about audience of 10%.
I know it's going to be a small audience, and by the way, for me, I'm okay with it. I don't care. I run a pension company, but at the same time, let me tell you what these people are watching: sitcoms, Okay. In other words, they're not going to watch your show. They don't have $1,000. They watch sitcoms. Media sells they're called situated
Situational comedies.
comedies. Okay.
Sorry,
In
that's
other
good.
words,
Hey,
did we have a senator
We're curious to see
interrupt
what the
us?
senator had to say, but we're talking about economics. I was just going to bring up something really quickly before we toss it back to Steve and everything. One of the sectors that we have also talked about very quickly in this show and everything is the construction industry. And I did not mention the figures on the construction industry because we oftentimes hear people talking about the influx of people from Latin America and things of that nature. But if they're taking the jobs and other people are not taking the jobs, whose fault is that? Because at last count, apparently there are nearly 350,000 open construction jobs nationwide. So I'm thinking that means there's some people that are not taking the jobs that fall in all kinds of economic.
And that was on 60 Minutes. I mean, there was a thing on 60 Minutes talking
That's
about
what I was talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's go back to the failure of our education system. Okay. Okay, Mark, did you take a construction job course when you were in high school?
When I was in high school, we had two options. When I was in high school, we had two options. We had an option of either going the college route, which is the route that I chose. That was one of the paths that you could go, or you could go the vocational route. Now, in the vocational route, there were some courses around welding, and there were some courses around auto mechanics. So there were some jobs that were in that did fall into what is now considered the construction industry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And the thing is, remember, the construction industry is a huge industry. Mm-hmm. It's not just welding, it's architectural design, it's building lots, there's a lot of economics and putting plats together. You have to work with politicians like Steve to convince them that your project is worthy for their city. There's a lot of things, but here's my point. Our teachers aren't trained in the construction industry, in other words, the real estate development industry. And because they're not trained, the students, which are middle school, elementary, and high school students, get no training in a huge industry, which is our real estate development industry, otherwise known as construction, which there are a lot of jobs in. And so this goes back to my beef on the education system. There's no movement in the United States to train people in this area as well. So
the new jobs, the new economy, right?
Steve, the new job and new economy. Instead, and I'm just cringing. What my grandchild is learning at a Chapel Hill school is Latin. Okay,
he is definitely lacking.
Okay, Latin. Okay, I just cringed, almost jumped out of my chair. I was very quiet, didn't say anything, jumped out of my chair because Latin is a dead language. It's good for your SAT scores. Okay, which is that game out of ETS. But other than that, it's a worthless subject. And if you want to learn it on your own, go ahead. Or if you want to take an extracurricular class, go ahead. But it would be better for him to have finance and economics or something that is actually useful. Financial planning, real estate planning. There's so many different things you can learn when you're in school. But the Latin teacher needs a job. And so what do they teach them? Latin. And I'm just the thing is...
Well, anyway,
I hear you, and I was like I said, I'm going to toss it back to Steve one more time. Hold on one second.
The United States.
We did want to go back to Steve, but I do want to clarify something. The remote job that they talked about on 60 Minutes was that pre-pandemic, it was 1 in every 67 jobs. As of right now, it is 1 in 7. So 1 in 7 jobs are remote, and they are saying that is probably a shift that is going to maintain and will continue because more and more people. One of the points that they were making, and I'm glad that Steve watched that show as well, was that we are moving into a different kind of environment, and they did not feel that we were ever going to go back to the old environment, that it is going to be a new model because actually, as they pointed out, the employee is actually the one that is driving the ship, not the employer. So the employee is the one that is driving the ship because they want things that have to do with comfort, with being able to work from home, from being able to be in an environment that they like, and also an environment that is more conducive to them. So it used to be that the employer was the boss, but now it seems like the employee.
Well, because they're more entrepreneurial. But put these two statistics together and riddle me this, Batman. 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 in their bank account. They kind of scrounge $1,000 if they were told, if you don't give me $1,000 by tomorrow, you're dead. But here's another statistic, just came out of the Wall Street Journal, today. Average new home is $415,000 in the United States. Okay, riddle me this, Batman. How can a person that has $1,000 in the bank afford a $415,000 home? Steve, you're a politician, and I know you guys don't care about it because you're spending all your time with abortion and critical race theory and all this other stuff. Okay, but at the same time, I'm just down home basic economics. How do you riddle this situation in Mooresville? Except perhaps Mooresville, they're not as bad as some of the other cities in the country.
What are you talking about? Finding the educated workforce?
Well, the thing is, to me, the economics don't make sense. But in other words, if the average person in the United States has $1,000, 70%, more than the average person, 50%.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but the average home is 415,000.
Yes,
Riddle me this, Batman. How they're going to afford a
Nick,
home?
that's a great issue, and we might want to bring up as we move to getting more guests on the show. Let me say from the outset that this is a big issue, not only that any city in America is dealing with, but where we live, in Morrisville is one of them, and that's the rising home prices. Mm-hmm. And one of the concerns is that we just recently, I just did a newsletter that talked about all the economic development we had in Morrisville. We had $1 billion life science campus with tenants. We had Invitae, 400 jobs. Before that we had Apple. That was last April, 3,000 potential jobs. Then there was Science 37, which announced in December, another 500 jobs. Let alone other expansions like Microsoft, Wake County. I had a bunch of them, Amgen, others. Right.
Sure.
The point I'm trying to make is that the median incomes are rising, yes, but the housing prices are rising as well. And as you bring in these companies, where are you going to have people to live? And some people don't want to spend $800,000, $900,000 on their first home, especially if they're young. They want to get an apartment. A lot of these developments are walkable. I don't know the way it is in Canada, but here this whole notion of development is living. Well, I'm sure it's like that in Toronto and the bigger cities, Sasha, having a place where you can live, having a place you can work, having a place where you can go to restaurants. I'm sure there's nice parks in Canada. So that's the same type of development going on now. In the U.S., we're getting away from the classic strip mall, the urban sprawl. You'll go to a mall, or go to a big mall, now in the U.S. where Nick and I live and where Mark lives in Durham, people want to go to the theater. They want to go to a dinner before the show. They want to grab a dessert or drink at the bar. Then they want to walk home, right? And oh, by the way, I could have a job in the same city, right? So Nick, I hope that answers your question. It's right, spot on. And I think we need more affordable housing. We've got to see, and the president's put a lot of money in affordable housing, $550 billion. But what I want to know is, where's that money going?
Steve,
and is it going into the hands of people who can buy the houses?
But the question, who's going to provide that affordable housing?
The way it works, Sasha, that's a great question. Normally, the way affordable housing works, it's about, it would be normally have to be subsidized by the actual city, where they would have to put money in because it costs a lot of money for a developer to, afford a housable unit. But for those listening, when you say what is affordable, so typically today, what they define as the affordable metric is about $18 an hour a job. If you're making $18 an hour where we live in the U.S., you would be able to buy a 2-bedroom apartment for about $960, right? So you can imagine if you're living below at minimum wage or even above, you might have to work 3 or 4 jobs just to find a place to live, which is why we're seeing the homeless go up, right? Now, who pays for it? That's another thing, right? Because you have to invest money. I mean, the money has to come from the government. That's why the president, in this Build Back Better, wants to provide more money for affordable housing. But and the developer, they're in it to make money, right? So they're not going to go in there and invest in affordable housing. Now you have a few like Habitat for Humanity, where President Carter works still part-time, or he does that, where they're building homes, right? I hope that answers your question, but that's a great.
Well, not only that, but Steve, one of the things, and I think it's kind of what Nick was alluding to, was that part of what's happening with what's going on is that people are moving to places that they can afford a home much more than they can afford an apartment. Like you said, there are places, I don't know what the rent is. I can look it up in New York, but I just looked up the average apartment rate in San Francisco. You've heard me complain about their rent here, and that's because it's close to $1,000 and things of that nature. But I'd be paying 3 times that much if I was living in San Francisco. Right. The average apartment rate in San Francisco is apparently $3,244, and for a studio apartment, there are some that might be going for like $2,400. So, that's double or in some cases triple what I'm paying right here and all of that. Now, given some of these people are living and working in Silicon Valley and are able to afford those jobs, but I doubt that everybody in San Francisco is working for Silicon Valley. I know that Silicon Valley is a very much an important part of that area, but just logic tells me that there are people that are working for restaurants, there are people that are working for the school system, there are people that are working for a lot of other jobs that are probably not getting paid silicone wages. So I can understand why people might be moving to, say, a Greenville or a Charleston or a Morrisville or a number of other places up and down the East Coast that are able to afford a lot less. Because I'm thinking if the apartments are that much, the houses have got to be just as ridiculous. So if you can come down here and get a nice apartment or a nice house that you own and it's got a front yard and all of that for, let's say, anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000, I can see where you might decide that I don't want to spend like close to $1 million over there in California or New York and move down to some of these more affordable places.
Well, what you're saying is right, Mark, and that's one reason a major chip company is thinking about putting a $40 billion plant in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, because it's a lot cheaper than San Francisco.
Yeah.
A lot of big companies are moving out of San Francisco. I've worked with several of them that have been moving to Texas or some other places because the cost structure is out of control. The only people who can afford to live there are people that bought years ago. New people can't. It's impossible. Even on your basic engineering salary of $200,000 a year, you're struggling in San Francisco. Now think about it. You're making $200,000 a year and you're struggling to pay the mortgage, to pay the housing cost, to pay, just to live in San Francisco. So a lot of these companies start recognizing it. That's one reason there's a flight to Austin, flight to Research Triangle Park, because even though we're expensive here, $415,000 for a home, let's say, over there it's $1,415,000 or $2 million for the same home. And so when I was over there, this goes a couple of years ago, a place called Belvedere in Tiburon, those homes, they were tiny little homes and they were all multi-million-dollar homes. I mean, you're not getting anything. Take all the Research Triangle Park homes, take all the Morrisville homes, tack $1.2 million on top of the whatever the price is. And that's what Silicon Valley homes are today. You won't see too many people from Silicon Valley on our show. Do you know why? They can't get on our show. They're too busy working. They have to work 24/7 just to support themselves in San Francisco.
Yes.
I'm serious. They have no life there.
This may be a good topic to bring up in another show, affordable housing. I want to get back to finishing up our conversation on democracy before we get back to other things. But the guy that just called me is the minority whip of the state Senate, Democratic minority whip, Jay Chaudhary. He's actually the first Indian American elected to the state Senate, one of my closest friends. And he validated to me, he's been saying this all along, that democracy is in danger because of the outcomes of the elections being determined, and how in a close presidential race, if the legislatures were able to tweak these laws, that it could turn the outcome of an election, and particularly if Trump is the nominee. This is a reality. The senator confirmed to me that he was actually just speaking about this last night. The fact of the matter is, though, it's so hard to get through all the noise. Most people hear so much, and that's why I wanted to bring that up, is when I sent my email out, I think there's such a defensive mechanism of, oh God, that's that liberal media. They've gotten to Steve, and and I didn't really come out highlight like I did today, which is, it's about outcomes of elections, right? That, sooner or later. Now, in terms of fraud, I need to go back and find the data. I have seen no voter fraud in the U.S. Billions of votes cast, maybe only 20, 30 cases of fraud, if not that. But I'm going to do better about pinpointing that, because people keep coming back to me saying, well, the election was rigged. And we don't want to talk about the Weimar Republic, but let's remember, in Germany, the big lie was that the Germans didn't really lose the war, but they were forced to negotiate a surrender. And this is what gave the rise to Hitler.
Yeah.
Where he came in and was able to win off that, and eventually he became appointed the chancellor by Wittenberg, I think. And then, the rest is history. He became the Führer and the dictator and the Third Reich. Now, we're not comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. I want those listening, no way. I know he's bad, but I don't think he would have people killed. But the thing is
Well,
that
yeah, I don't think he would have people killed, maybe, but he did learn some tactics, and he's not the first one from that person that you just mentioned, that was the leader of Germany and everything. And
well,
people forget that that Hitler was actually had some folks who were part of his propaganda machine, because there was a propaganda machine that was part of what was going on there in Nazi Germany and everything, that came out of the Hollywood industry. And Birth of the Nation had not been that long removed when some of those folks were helping him in his cause. And I would argue that there were some people, matter of fact, I was just watching a documentary on this yesterday and everything, that there are some folks even in the South that got some of their tactics in the sense of propaganda and the use of propaganda straight from that playbook. And that's some of the folks that were there, like George Wallace and some of the others in the segregationist South and all of that. So definitely some of that playbook was learned directly from Hitler and was definitely used from other places as well. So I don't know if Sasha's got any thoughts on that, but I would argue that Trump, while he may not be trying to massacre folks the way that some of these other dictators and despots and others
now,
have done, he has definitely been a master of propaganda and a master of getting his word out in a propaganda standpoint. But like I
now,
said, Sasha,
yes.
you come from a place that is definitely had its history of propaganda. So I was just wondering your thoughts about Trump maybe learning some of his playbook from Stalin and Hitler and some of the others.
Well, that's generally unfair to compare Trump to Hitler because Hitler is dead, as far as we know, for a long time, and Trump is still alive and kicking. So, in fact, Trump has all opportunities to exceed Hitler by far, and we have to give him a chance to do so.
Well, I think yeah, and I think the key is you're seeing similarities with just it's not so much about Adolf Hitler. It's just outsiders coming in that are building, getting people to believe things that aren't completely true. And then all and speaking of outsiders, we're going to leave this topic, but we're going to stay on it every few weeks because I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think on World Edition, we have a responsibility to have a conversation about how we make it better, not pointing the finger and attacking, but I want to bring in Democrats, I want to bring in Republicans, and I want World Edition to be the place where we have a conversation on how we can help our country deal with this and how we can be an example to other countries around the world about why democracy is declining. But speaking of outsiders, Clay Aiken, former American Idol, jumping in the 6th congressional race, which was surprising to all of us. So that's an interesting thing, whether he can have an advantage being a celebrity and raising money. He tried to run for Congress before and lost to George Holding. But now, I don't know, Mark, what your thoughts are about that. Another superstar getting in there.
It's another superstar. He didn't have much luck the last time he ran, and I don't know that he's put together any new team that's going to give me a cause to think that he's going to win this time. Yes, he does have that celebrity cachet behind him and everything. But that being said, I do remember that he definitely did not do all that well the first time he tried to run for political office, and I've not heard any rumblings about any new machine behind him or anything along those lines. And in terms of being a top entertainer, I haven't really heard that much from Clay in a while. While I'm glad that he came from North Carolina and all of that, it was definitely a winner of a major talent showcase. He's been kind of under the radar, so that may help him in his political campaign. But part of what a lot of these folks do when they run, they are running on their celebrity status. And if you don't really have that much celebrity status, how much good is that going to do you? Because, like I said, I've not heard that much from Clay lately and everything. Maybe y'all have heard something that I have missed or something along those lines, but I do know that I'm fairly in tune to the local and the statewide entertainment committee. And Clay, if he's doing anything, he's
He
found
does
a way
have a
underneath
name.
the radar.
Well, what I did speak to Senator Childry briefly and others, and they were basically saying that this may affect Senator Nichols' chances a little bit in terms of playing into that base. But I do believe that this does change the dynamics of the race because he's going to have more name recognition, more ability to raise money, and a crowded primary might be just the right place to win a Democratic nomination, right?
I never heard of him.
Because
Who is he? Who is he? What does he do?
Clay
Clay Aikens was known for winning one of those major talent competitions.
Oh, see, I don't watch any of that trash. So
Right.
I don't know who those
He's a pretty
people are.
well-known guy, though, But
Yeah,
anyway,
no,
and then,
I know. I just don't watch it. I mean, the thing is that you got their 70%. They have $1,000. They watch that stuff. The 30%, we don't watch that stuff. We don't have the time for that. I'm sorry. So I don't watch it. So it's good for politics, but certainly not good for your pocketbook. In the
well,
meantime, we do have a quick commercial break. If we can do that.
is that
yeah,
this week or
well,
next week? Is that this week or next week?
Well, actually, we have following this program, we're going to have Dennis Stearns, who's going to be with the Honorable David M. Walker. Dennis manages a $1 billion plus money manager here in the Research Triangle Park area. He actually has an office in Chapel Hill in Greensboro. He's going to be talking about economic forecast in 2022 with the Honorable David Walker, who used to run a multi-trillion-dollar business called the United States of America, where he was the Controller General. That's immediately following this, so in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Will you send us?
Yes, in about 20 minutes or something like that.
Can we attend? Can I attend that today, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, I'll send links out. I'll redistribute on all the Facebook
Okay.
groups. I may not do it right now. This is being shown, by the way, on Al Jazeera. You guys got picked up again on Al Jazeera. My thing worked. So the people in the Middle East are watching your show, Steve, and we give them no love in Qatar, which is where Al Jazeera is actually headquartered.
Well, speaking of Middle East, I did want to talk about, I have a friend that's taking a trip to Dubai at the end of the month, and apparently Dubai is just booming and skyrocketing. We'd love to maybe learn a little bit more about what's going on in Dubai from an economic development perspective. So out there in the Middle East, if you have an idea that you want to share, please chime in. We want to learn about that part of the world.
Yeah.
And real quickly, just what the other thing going on around the world, if you're interested in, we are starting discussions today, I believe, between the United States and Russia. I don't know whether it's going to be a phone call between Putin and Biden or their people, but it's going to be talking about this continued situation in Ukraine, whether this is Putin's way of dealing with fighting sanctions or whatever. Djokovic has a court hearing today about whether
actually the verdict just came in, and I think that they said he could stay. That is what I heard.
You're kidding me.
Yep, they said he could stay.
The court's going to allow him to play tennis?
They said he could stay.
Not only
That's
that, the Australian government has to pay all his expenses and immediately release him from the.
Now he hasn't been able to play for a few days, so he needs to get back on the court.
He got a good law firm, baby.
Yes,
power of getting a good law firm. Now, speaking about good law firm, who's representing the United States in the negotiations with Ukraine? Sasha, are you helping out the good old U.S.?
I think the delegation is headed by Blinken, and I think they're
Secretary of State, Tony Blinken.
Yeah, I believe so. And so far, I haven't heard yet anything meaningful about this so-called negotiations. And I don't.
This is where you need a powerful law firm on your side, because a powerful law firm would get in there and settle this by basically paying off a bunch of people in Russia. Okay. I mean, right? In other words, if you paid off Putin and you paid off a couple of these other things, the $100,000 person army would kind of disappear and go back.
No, Nick, I'm afraid that the opposite might be true, and more so. That Russians are in a position to pay any American subjects to, they want something concrete to be done. They are in a position to pay American, and American, with everything what's going on now with coronavirus and economy, I think a lot of Americans will accept Russian money, and they will be very glad.
Why would they pay the Americans? Why would the Russians pay the Americans? They're the ones who are threatening to come into Ukraine.
No, well, they don't pay directly. What they do is they cultivate you as an asset, as happened to one of the presidents of the United States quite recently, and they develop you, and they essentially have you as an asset.
Oh,
and you know what? It doesn't even cost that much money to do so.
That's true.
That's true.
By the politicians in the United States, they're pretty cheap. except for you, Steve. They can buy the politicians in the United States by paying into their PACs, and then they can own the U.S.
Nick,
government.
I heard an interesting idea.
Absolutely.
That's
I heard
true.
an
There
interesting
are
idea.
several ways of doing that legally.
Yeah,
You don't even break the law by doing so.
I know that by the political action committees. I'm
Absolutely.
shocked. I'm shocked that Putin, because he does have a lot of resources, didn't purchase a lot of the senators and congressmen over here
No, I'm
already.
sure he did, and I'm
You
sure that he's still trying to purchase some others. But speaking of that, I had an interesting idea that was brought up in a, I think it was another documentary that I was watching yesterday. But it was definitely an interesting idea that I think you might have mentioned, or other people have mentioned, but nobody's really given it traction. Even though I think it's a great idea, we do know that there is a sex offenders registry, which means that if you get a
Yeah, right.
conviction in that there is a registry saying that you should be on that. And somebody had written in and put it out on the table, and I think if these put the wheels in motion to do a similar registry for the police force, meaning that you're not going to be able to go from one job to another if you've been involved in a bad incident of killings, whether that was through corruption or whether that's through the abuse of a certain community, whether that's a African American community or Latin American community or whatever.
Yeah.
But this gentleman was saying that, I think he's from Genesee, and I'm not sure where Genesee is and everything, but he was definitely saying that he had put together the wheels in motion and got some pushback, but he was definitely saying that there would be a registry of the police force. So if somebody did bad policing in say DC or Durham, they weren't going to be able to go to Little Rock, Arkansas, because their buddy lived there and get a whole nother job and bring their bad habits to that part of the world as well.
I actually, Mark, I can actually shed some light on this subject. First of all, I'm shocked that they don't have it already. In the securities exchange area that we work in with securities people, all the securities rep and your financial advisor has a form ADV. Okay, in other words, they're all registered. A lot of the general public don't even know this exists. We do as financial professionals. When a financial professional comes to work for our company, National Pensions, the first thing we do is a background check on them through their what they call Form ADV. Form ADV lists all the problems that this person may have, and they're required to have it all disclosed by the SEC. Now, if you're an individual, let's say somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, Mark, I want to do your financial planning," or Steve, first thing you should do is say, well, let me take a look at your Form ADV. If not, you go to a place called Broker Check. I'm not kidding. This exists right now out there. It's called Broker Check, and anyone can do it. And you can see whether or not your securities broker has any violations on top of it. So it already exists in the financial planning industry. It already exists in the sex offender industry. I'm shocked it doesn't exist in the police industry. You know, I don't hire policemen. You know, that's Steve's job since he's a councilman. Whether or not there's a national registry like there is in securities shocks me that it doesn't exist. You know, and if somebody says, well, we're fighting against it, it already exists in the securities industry. It exists for years. This isn't, the broker check has not been something that was made up. And part of the reason they did it, Mark, is financial advisors would come to you. And I knew something. They would literally have stolen $1 million from some guy and say, "Hey, Mark, I'm going to be your financial advisor now. Turn over the money to my account." And all of a sudden, that money's gone. Well, they put a kibosh to that years ago. And this is, again, part of the education that everybody who listens to our show should know. You should have learned it in elementary school and middle school, and we're not teaching it. That financial advisors, securities brokers, check their form, ADV, it's called, and go to Broker Check to see if they're legit, and do your background research. And police registry, I'm appalled that it doesn't exist already. Are you kidding me? Of course they should. They should have. They do that in every industry I work in, and they're not doing it with policemen. Those are people that can shoot you, and you don't have a registry. I gotta go. I can't handle that.
Yep. No registry as of yet. What is your thoughts on this, Steve? You're in a city, Morrisville. So, what is your thoughts? Do you think that they should have this registry, and would you be supporting of such a registry? Because, like I said, I was shocked when I was watching the documentary, and this gentleman was saying that he was behind it and was, getting some pushback because, of course, folks want to protect their own. But what are your thoughts as one that is in Morrisville, and I know there's a police force there. So, would you be one that might support such a registry?
What would this registry be doing again?
It would basically let folks know that if a police officer had done very illegal or even immoral or other kind of things within their community that they wouldn't be able to, like, say, take a job in Mooresville. So let's say it was a bad cop in New York, that he wouldn't be able to just be able to automatically come down to this area and folks not know that he had that history in New York or in California, wherever he might have come from. So it would
Yeah, I mean,
basically,
I guess I'm supportive of it. I mean, hopefully background checks and stuff when you're going through a process would be screening that stuff anyway. And hopefully a police officer would come in, would be honest enough to say, look, depending how serious the mistake was, we all make mistakes. I think if you're upfront and give people a second chance, but I'm assuming that even if you don't use a registry like that, I'm sure background checks and things like that could uncover things pretty quickly. You can't hide anything anymore. I mean, whatever
how
you do, right?
yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I was just wondering, how monitored are the police in Canada? From what you know, Sasha, you come from us from Canada, and I'm imagining they're very monitored there in your former area of the Ukraine and Russia. But I was just wondering, how monitored, from what you've heard, are they in Canada? Because we oftentimes hear about, Serpico Canada cases and those kind of things that exist here in our media landscape, but also those were based on real life. I don't know that I've heard that much about it coming out of Canada, and I do know that Russia has its own way of dealing with folks. But I was just wondering, how did folks, from what you've heard, deal with police misconduct in Canada, and has it even been an issue that y'all talked about?
Police, generally speaking, police in Canada is very well respected. And although there might be some infractions and some irregularities in their job, I'm pretty sure there are, except that I never heard about one and it hasn't been discussed, at least lately. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And generally, people, they're looking up to police, even helping people out if they have some problems or so on. They don't feel that police is anything like a threatening force or something to avoid. Furthermore, they look up for police to be able to help them in different situations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, both of y'all, we did lose a couple of icons over the last couple of
Yeah,
weeks. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a
yeah.
friend of mine
I was
who
gonna
lives
close out
in.
honoring him. I was gonna close out honoring one of them.
Okay, and that's probably the one I was going to mention and everything, but I'll just mention really quickly that a friend of mine lives in Las Vegas, and she did tell me that I want to say both Obama and Biden had been there to honor Harry Reid and everything, because they definitely were there for his homegoing service, and definitely was very well attended. She was telling me that she was actually going to her job in Arizona in the teaching profession, because she has jobs in both Arizona and Nevada, but she was dealing with traffic because of the amount of folks that were coming to honor that legend. But the one that I was really thinking about was Sidney Poitier. And of course, Sidney Poitier was in everything from Lilies of the Field to working with Cosby on some films to a number of other great films that I could name. And it was definitely also seen as a civil rights activist and was definitely very much involved in that space as well. So I have a great deal of respect for Sidney Poitier, and was sad to see him pass on. And apparently one of the organizers for a major musical festival also has recently passed away as well, that being Michael Lang, who is the driving force behind Woodstock. So he passed away at 77 recently as well. So those were three that had crossed my mind and all of that. I don't know if you have, either of you, any thoughts about those, but I do know that I have a great deal of respect for Sidney, both as an activist and also as a actor as well, because he definitely did wear his activism with pride, in addition to being a tremendous actor.
Yes, I think it's amazing, and he was such a legend, first black man to win the Oscar. I think he was also in Raising the Sun,
Yes,
a
he
number
was.
of different classics, both movie on and plays, Broadway. Oprah Winfrey was a big fan of his, and former Senator, the late Senator Reid, a real advocate for public policy, Affordable Care Act, and then we're going to talk about the final one today, who was an American, who was pretty much in our living room most of the 90s. I just had a question real quickly. Well, not a question. I wanted to bring it up again. We're going to talk about this week, but someone just posted on Facebook, and I try to stay away from COVID discussions, but they were asking me what I was trying to say about um, the pandemic. And what I was trying to say is that dealing with Omicron is very different than what we were dealing with in March of last year, when basically it's very clear that if you're vaccinated, you're 81% less likely to, and you have a two vaccinations, a booster, you're 81% likely to get the infection. And even if you do get the variant, you'll pretty much have flu-like symptoms. And so we have to make sure it's important that we're doing what we can to vaccinate people and understand the importance of vaccination, because it's not only your health, it's infecting someone else. The second thing that's different, testing becomes as important as it was before, regardless of where in the world you're listening. But what I'm finding interesting is not the PCR test, but the antigen test, because it is the minute you get positive, you quarantine immediately. So the quicker we can get people out of the public, in that moment they have COVID, they're not going to the shop, they're not going to the gym, they're not going somewhere to infect someone else. That's very, very important. So now the question becomes, is the vaccine going to have enough room to move and mutate again for another variant, or are we going to have enough herd immunity through Omicron? We're getting 1 million cases a day in the U.S. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but are enough people going to get it that whatever future mutations come out, they'll be less severe, right? That's all I'll say about that. Don't want to get us in trouble with social media platforms, but that's what I was trying to say. How we deal with this pandemic now is different than what we were doing. So rather than focusing on closures and lockdowns and all that stuff, I think it's more about testing, masking, and then making sure that one final thing I'll say, I'm going to get back to you guys, is the CDC has changed the guidelines now that you don't have to be there for five. You can only be once you get positive, isolated for 3 days, and you can go back once you're better. And so that's no different than the flu, for example. You don't mandate someone that gets the flu that they're gone for a week or 5 days, right? And the Supreme Court will be finding out what they're doing with the vaccine mandates very soon. But
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that regard. I'd also seen that in the news that the person that gave Rittenhouse took a plea deal. So it seems like Rittenhouse, from what I understand, totally got off, but the other person, it looks like they are taking a plea deal because they're the ones that supplied him with the gun and all of that. So it does seem like they took a plea deal in that whole case. So the case is not completely over because there's still some fallout within that, and I need to do a little bit more research as to what the plea deal was and exactly what they got, if they got any sentencing or things along those lines. But it's always interesting when these cases happen. Sometimes the lesser players are the ones that wind up paying more of the penalty and all of that. But I don't know if you've heard anything, if you have any thoughts about this plea deal that was offered to the person that actually bought Rittenhouse the gun or supplied him with the gun.
No, I don't know anything about it. But
Yeah.
these issues are going to continue to come up. We haven't seen a lot of cases like that in the last couple of weeks, but a lot of gun violence, gun deaths. It's just one of the things. And we look forward to bringing back Shaquille Latimer. We miss his presence.
We definitely missed Kill, and hopefully he's going to come back. I know he was, earlier this year, he was definitely celebrating and definitely enjoying that. But hopefully he's going to be doing better, and I definitely would enjoy his presence back in here with you as well. And I hear what you're saying about these different variants and whether they're going to actually ever end. I remember your old saying of it being like a hydra, and I do sometimes feel that way, wondering when the next one is going to pop up and what it is going to do in that sense.
We have to get more people vaccinated to reduce the virus's chance to move and mutate. But hopefully it's enough of an Omicron variant getting out there that the more people that get infected, they're getting that built-in immunity, the herd immunity, and that whatever future variants come will be less severe. We simply don't know. That's the problem. There's just no way of looking in a crystal ball. I don't know how much longer I can live like this, but I have good days and bad days where,
Right.
You just want to get out and get back to going out to dinner and going to events in person, and all of that's been canceled now. not as many in-person events, and it's hard to do business that way, right? I mean,
It's very hard to do business that way, and it's a difficult thing. And I know a lot of people are concerned from a civil rights standpoint about the mandates because they're feeling like, on one hand, they
yeah,
definitely want to see the continuation of the getting that herd immunity, but on the other hand, I have heard some people that are concerned about the rights that people have when you're
yes,
giving them a mandate and telling them that they absolutely must
and
get
and I've been doing
vaccine or
yes,
that they lose their job.
and one thought to share. I know we're closing in a few minutes, but and we still have 5 minutes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
But the bottom line is that um, you know I think folks don't understand that if you're if the vaccination rates increase, it does help accelerate this pandemic going away. However, I will say this: I started thinking when I got those emails from people, I've often said that I have to go to a seatbelt, I have to go get a driver's license, I can't drive while I'm under the influence of alcohol, I have to have my registration in my car. Well, why couldn't you have to get a vaccine? But those things I just mentioned don't have anything to do with your body. And so now I'm getting a sensitivity now. I can understand some of these Republicans that are emailing me saying, look, you're taking away my freedom. Is it their right to do what they want with their body? I'm trying to figure this out, right? But I get it. That's where they're coming from. Why would you come in as the government and tell me you have to take a shot? Now, of course, we know that you're reducing the risk of spread and disease. But I think the question is that the government's choice or is it a choice of freedom? Individual choice. I don't
Yeah,
know.
what are your thoughts on that, Sasha? Because actually, by the way, folks will love the irony of this for those that come from the Republican side, because apparently AOC was recently diagnosed with COVID after she went down to Miami and partied maskless and did some other things while she was down there. So I'm sure the Republicans are going to run this into the ground as part of their campaign of discussion points and things of that nature. But Sasha, what are your thoughts about those that are thinking about the freedom aspect, that they are worried that their freedoms are being tackled and that their freedoms are not being respected if they, by their own choice, want to not take the shot, or they want to wear not wear their mask or whatever else they may not want to do. But I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts to those that are trying to make the civil liberties argument, for lack of a better term?
Um, Before this latest stamp, the so-called Omicron appeared, to me, issue was black and white, that people really have to get vaccinated at least twice, and the booster probably. And now with Omicron situation is somewhat different, in my opinion. The first of all, it's proven that the double vaccine and booster they will not insulate you from being infected. Other, in my opinion, more serious issue is the herd immunity concept. I'm not seeing any evidence that the antibodies will prevent you from getting sick with Omicron again. So you may get Omicron, thanks it's in a lighter form, and let's see, you will be okay in a few days. But then in 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, you can get it again, right? If there is no herd immunity concept is there, and we don't know that. So all I can say is that the vaccines, double vaccine plus booster, probably make it much less likely for you to get for a long period of time to the hospital, or even have a little situation. So, in my opinion, it protects you better. Now, if people still, it's not enough for them to believe, so okay, they may stay unvaccinated for all I
Yeah,
believe. But
absolutely.
I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I
Well,
understand.
it's
It's
time
on
for
you, Steve, to do the wrap up
it's
and get us
it's
on out
about
of here.
that time. Well, we've had a wonderful discussion today on World Edition. We'll be back tomorrow. Wanted everyone to know that today we lost yesterday a very famous American comedian and actor, Bob Saget. We remember him playing Danny Tanner on the show Full House. And wherever you are today in America, maybe you watched it around the world, we all got together and loved this wonderful story of a man who was raising three lovely daughters, living with his family right there in front of us every day in the living room. But the most important thing is Bob Saget, he died at a young age of 65. He was a good man. He was a smart guy. He also hosted America's Famous Videos and was humorous. But what they say is off screen, he was as much of a nice guy as he was on screen, playing the affable, lovable, and mentor to many of us as we watched him as a father figure and a great example of an American family that we got to see grow up in front of our very own eyes. We pray for his family and his children as we celebrate his loss, or celebrate his life, and we mourn his loss, along with joining Sidney Poitier at the age of 94, and of course, just last week, Betty White. From our family at Pod TV to yours, we wish you a wonderful, productive day wherever you are in the world. We'll be back next week as we continue, tomorrow, as we continue our dynamic and engaging discussions. Thank you all. We'll be back.